My family treated me like I was nothing, but when I won 85 meter in the lottery, everyone wanted peace. I never thought I'd end up like this. 38, divorced, and still hauling boxes at the same dead-end warehouse job I had when I was 20. But here I am, living in a town where the most exciting thing that happens is when Walmart gets a new soda flavor. Name's Mike Turner, born and raised in Ohio, and let me tell you, it ain't as exciting as people from the coast like to pretend. It's all cornfields, chain restaurants, and that one guy in town who thinks he's better than everyone because he went to college in Cleveland. Been working at the same warehouse since I was old enough to legally drink. And the biggest promotion I ever got was switching from day shift to night shift. Not exactly what you'd call an American dream. My ex-wife, Kate, figured that out before I did. She left me 2 years ago for a dentist. Some guy with a perfect smile, a retirement plan, and a garage big enough for a boat. We never even went near a lake. But sure, why not? I could sit here and pretend I was blindsided. But the truth is, you can tell when someone's checked out. They start texting more, laughing less, and suddenly every little thing you do is annoying. By the time she finally left, I think the dog took it harder than I did. Then there's my older brother, Randy. If there was ever a golden child, it's him. He's a real estate hotshot who struts into every family gathering like he's about to close $1 million deal. Mom and Dad treat him like he discovered electricity, while I'm over here getting passive-aggressive comments about how there's still time to turn things around. Every Thanksgiving, he rolls up in some brand-new SUV, talks about the market, and makes me feel like I should be handing out carts at a grocery store. So, yeah, life? Not exactly one for the highlight reel. That's why, on a particularly miserable Tuesday night, I wasn't expecting much more than a six-pack and some mindless TV. Work had been brutal. One of those days where your back hurts so bad you start wondering if disability fraud is worth the risk. It had been raining since noon, that cold, miserable drizzle that soaks into your soul. I pulled into the 7-Eleven, parked my old '06 Ford Ranger, and shuffled inside, trying not to track mud on the floor. I grabbed a pack of Bud Light. Yeah, I know, but when rent's due, you don't exactly splurge, and toss it on the counter. Dug through my wallet, and came up with just enough cash to cover it. After tax, I had exactly $2 left. The kid at the register, who looked like he should still be in algebra class, was scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging my existence. Then I saw the stack of Powerball tickets next to the register. I don't even know why I did it. I've never been one of those lucky people, but maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe it was just boredom. I slid my last $2 across the counter. Give me one of those. The kid finally looked up, grinned, and said, "Might be your lucky day." I let out a dry chuckle. Yeah, sure, kid. I shoved the ticket into my jacket pocket and walked back out into the rain, bracing myself for another forgettable night in my very forgettable life. That's where I would have left it. Just another $2 wasted on a pipe dream. Except sometimes, against all odds, those pipe dreams come true. I woke up to the same old routine. Aching back, lukewarm coffee, and a half-charged phone I forgot to plug in properly the night before. My apartment was as uninspiring as ever. The morning news droning on in the background about some politician messing up again. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, scrolling through my phone out of habit. That's when I saw it, the winning Powerball numbers. My thumb hovered over the screen. My brain didn't process it right away. I blinked, stared, and then dug into my jacket pocket where I had stuffed the ticket the night before. My hands weren't exactly steady as I flattened out the crumpled paper. First number, match. Second number, match. My breathing got weird, shallow. Third, fourth, fifth, every single one matched. I held my breath, barely daring to look at the Powerball number. It matched. For a long second, I just sat there. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like my ribs were going to crack. This had to be a mistake. I checked the numbers again. Then again. I pulled up the official lottery app, scanned the ticket. The screen flashed. Winner, $85 million. My coffee cup slipped from my hand and hit the table with a dull thunk. My brain refused to catch up to reality. What was I supposed to do now? I had seen the horror stories. People winning the lottery and ending up broke, divorced, or worse. Money changes things. Sometimes it makes life better. Sometimes it turns it into a circus. I wasn't sure which direction I was heading yet. I stood up too fast, knocking my chair back. My feet carried me outside before I even realized I had moved. The crisp morning air hit my face, but nothing felt real. The street looked the same. Mrs. Phillips across the way watering her sad-looking flowers. The guy who always jogged in cargo shorts passing by like it was just another Tuesday. The world was the same. But I wasn't. I needed to calm down. My stomach was in knots, my hands still shaky. I went back inside, paced my tiny living room for a few minutes, then turned on the TV to distract myself. A rerun of some reality show was playing. Rich people throwing drinks at each other over petty drama. It felt ridiculous now. $85 million. I could buy 10 of those stupid mansions they were fighting over. I walked into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Same old me, just a little more pale. I splashed some cold water on my face. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I had finally lost it after too many years of double shifts and cheap beer. I pulled out my phone again, checking the numbers for the 10th time. The app still confirmed it. There was no mistake. I couldn't just tell people. Not yet. That's how things spiral. But small towns don't let you keep secrets for long. I needed to claim the ticket. So I drove to the nearest lottery office, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. The drive felt surreal. The roads, the gas station, the strip mall with a rundown diner. It all looked exactly the same. But suddenly, I felt like I didn't belong there anymore. I stepped inside, keeping my face neutral. Act normal. Don't freak out. The clerk barely looked up as I slid the ticket across the counter. She typed something into her computer, then froze. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then to me. "You might want to sit down," she said. And just like that, my life as I knew it was over. I walked out of the office in a daze, feeling like I had a neon sign flashing millionaire over my head. A guy I vaguely knew from high school was in line behind me. He glanced at me, then at the clerk's stunned face. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. By the time I made it back home, my phone was already buzzing with texts. The news was out. By the next morning, my phone had turned into a ticking time bomb of missed calls and unread messages. The news spread faster than I could even begin to process it. First came the call from my parents. My mom, who usually reserved her calls for birthdays and guilt trips about skipping Thanksgiving, was suddenly overflowing with warmth. She said she was proud of me. I could almost hear my dad in the background making some offhand comment about finally catching a break. But it didn't take long before she slid in a casual remark about how Randy had been thinking about expanding his real estate business and how a new office space could really help him grow. Subtle. Randy himself showed up that evening. He wasn't the type to drop by unannounced, but apparently, newfound wealth changed things. He strolled in with a bottle of Jack Daniels, flashing his signature overconfident grin. He acted like this was just another casual brotherly visit, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. He sat down, poured himself a drink, and started talking about managing wealth and how people in my position needed guidance. He didn't say it outright, but it was clear he thought I was too dumb to handle the money on my own. He threw around phrases like smart investments and long-term security, but all I heard was give me a cut. At work, things took a weird turn. The guys at the warehouse weren't exactly subtle. I walked in, and for the first 5 minutes, no one said a word, just side eyes and smirks. Then the joke started. "Hey, millionaire, what are you still doing here? Don't lift that box, Mike. Wouldn't want you to strain your billionaire muscles." It was all fun and games at first, but I could feel the shift. Some of them started treating me like a walking ATM, dropping hints about how tough life was and how crazy rent prices had gotten. Others acted like I didn't deserve it, like I had cheated some universal system by getting lucky. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. The entire town felt different now. The waitress at Joe's Diner, the one who had barely acknowledged me for the past 5 years, suddenly remembered my name and threw in an extra stack of pancakes with my breakfast. The guy who used to cut me off in traffic at the same intersection every morning. Now he waved me through with a big, fake smile. And then there was Kate. 2 years. 2 years since she left me for Dr. Perfect Teeth. 2 years without so much as a "how have you been?" And now, out of nowhere, she sent me a message. "Hey, maybe we should meet up and catch up." I stare at my screen, my stomach twisting into knots. There was no way this was just a coincidence. Maybe she had regrets. Maybe life with Mr. Root Canal wasn't as perfect as she'd thought. Or maybe, more likely, she saw my name in the news and suddenly remembered that I existed. I didn't reply. Not yet. I wasn't sure what game she was playing. But I wasn't about to be some fool who let the past come crawling back just because my bank account had a few more zeros in it. By the time I crashed onto my couch that night, I felt drained. The money wasn't even in my hands yet, and already it was changing everything. Everyone wanted something. Everyone had an opinion. The next morning, I decided to take a drive. I needed to clear my head. I pulled into the gas station, and before I even got out of my truck, the guy at the next pump leaned over. "Hey, man, crazy about your win, huh? You thinking about staying in town?" I forced a smile. "Haven't decided yet." He nodded like he understood something I didn't. "Well, if you ever need a financial guy, my cousin's real good with numbers." Of course he was. I filled up my tank and drove aimlessly for an hour, ending up at the old lake where my dad used to take me and Randy fishing as kids. The water was still, the docks empty. For the first time in 24 hours, nobody wanted anything from me. I sat there, staring at the lake, trying to process what my life had just become. I just wasn't sure what mine was yet. The first thing I bought wasn't a mansion, a yacht, or some ridiculous sports car. It was a truck, a brand new Ford F-150, black with all the bells and whistles. I had been driving the same beat-up '06 Ranger for over a decade, and honestly, I felt like I deserved something that didn't sound like it was falling apart every time I hit a pothole. But the moment I pulled into my driveway, reality hit me. I didn't want my neighbors to see it. The second they did, the questions would start, the assumptions, the whispers. So, instead of parking out front like any normal person proud of their new ride, I took a few extra turns and parked it 3 blocks away in an empty lot. I walked the rest of the way home, shaking my head at how ridiculous it was to feel guilty about buying something with my own money. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a kid sneaking candy before dinner. I walked to where I had left my truck and just stood there for a minute, staring at it. I had dreamed about buying a brand new vehicle for years, and now that I finally had one, I was afraid to be seen with it. Ridiculous. But that's what money does. It changes how you think, even about the simplest things. And then came Randy. He called that afternoon, voice dripping with excitement. He was hosting a small family gathering over the weekend and thought it would be the perfect chance for me to celebrate with everyone. By small family gathering, he meant half the damn town. I pulled into his driveway and saw at least 50 people, most of whom I barely recognized. There were tables set up, a DJ playing country classics, and a massive catering spread that I was informed, after fact, was coming out of my pocket. $2,000, gone in an instant, all because Randy figured I had more money than I knew what to do with. I spent the entire afternoon shaking hands, fake laughing at jokes, and dodging questions about what I planned to do next. It was suffocating. People I hadn't spoken to since high school suddenly remembered we were old friends. Parents of kids I played baseball with as a kid were throwing out phrases like, "We always knew you'd do something big, Mike." I was just a guy who got lucky. But nobody saw it that way. Aunt Susan, who I hadn't seen in years, cornered me near the drinks table, going on about how times were tough and how her son, who, last I heard, still lived in her basement playing video games, was so close to a big breakthrough, if only I had some financial help. Then there was Jerry, a guy who used to shove me into lockers back in high school, now acting like we were lifelong best friends. "Mike, buddy, man, I always knew you were going to go places. Listen, I got this business idea, real game changer. You got a minute?" I didn't. I had about 10 people circling me at all times, waiting for the perfect moment to drop their pitches, sob stories, or not-so-subtle hints that I should share the wealth. The next day, I stopped by the 7-Eleven for a soda. The same cashier who sold me the winning ticket grinned as soon as he saw me. "Hey, man," he said, "any chance you wanna, spread a little of that luck my way?" He was joking. Sort of. I forced a chuckle, grabbed my drink, and left. But the comment stuck with me. It wasn't just about money. It was about the shift in how people saw me now. Every interaction felt different. Like I wasn't Mike anymore, just the guy who won. A couple of days later, I stopped by my usual diner for breakfast, hoping for some normalcy. Big mistake. "Mike!" The waitress, Becky, who had barely acknowledged me before, beamed like we were old pals. "Breakfast is on the house today. And hey, have you thought about sponsoring our little league team? They could use some new uniforms." I smiled weakly, muttered something about thinking it over, and shoveled my pancakes down as fast as I could. It was starting to feel like I had a giant target on my back. By the time I got home, I realized something. I had more money than I ever thought I'd see in my lifetime, but for the first time, I felt like I had less control over my life than ever before. And that was terrifying. I spent the next couple of weeks dodging phone calls and ignoring texts. Everyone suddenly had an idea about how I should spend my money, and none of them involved me actually enjoying it. I was tired of the expectations, the weird looks, the fake friendliness. For the first time in my life, I had the power to do something for myself, but I had no idea what that something was. Then one night, it hit me. I was sitting in my living room, flipping through an old box of stuff my mom had given me years ago, mostly junk, things from my childhood she didn't want to throw out herself. At the bottom of the box, under a stack of old baseball cards and school photos, I found it, my grandpa's recipe book. My grandpa had been a legend in our family, at least in the way kids think their grandfathers are legends. He used to brew his own beer in the basement, making small batches of dark, rich ale that he'd let me help with when I was a kid. He'd let me stir the mash, showing me how the hops and malt worked together, explaining how patience was the key to a good brew. The smell of barley and yeast always clung to his clothes, and his old notebook was filled with detailed notes, numbers, and little scribbles about each batch he made. I flipped through the pages, the handwriting instantly familiar. He had drawn little stars next to the batches he was proud of, underlined mistakes, so he wouldn't repeat them. I had forgotten how much I loved those nights in the basement. The way he'd talk about beer like it was an art. And for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about something. I could open a bar. Not just any bar, but a real craft beer joint, the kind of place where people actually cared about what they were drinking. Something small, something good, something that felt real. A place with good conversation, maybe a dartboard in the back, and a jukebox that played classics instead of whatever auto-tune nonsense had taken over the radio. I mentioned the idea to Randy the next day. Big mistake. "A bar? You?" He laughed so hard, he nearly choked on his coffee. "Mike, you've never run a business in your life. You won't even buy a pizza without a coupon. What makes you think you can handle something like this?" I should have expected that reaction. Randy had spent his entire life acting like he had all the answers, like he was a responsible one just because he wore a suit and drove a car with heated seats. But something about the way he said it hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I wasn't a business guy. I didn't have experience. I had never managed anything more complicated than warehouse inventory. Was I really going to take my lottery winnings and gamble them on something that could fail spectacularly? Doubt crept in fast. I sat with my grandpa's book for hours that night, running through everything in my head. What if Randy was right? What if I wasn't capable of pulling this off? The next day, I drove around town, stopping by every bar that had been around for more than 10 years. I wanted to see what worked, what didn't. I talked to a few bartenders, watched how customers interacted. There was a rhythm to a good bar, something effortless, like a well-tuned guitar. The regulars all knew each other. The bartender had stories to tell, and the beer actually mattered. That night, I went home, pulled out the notebook again, and started taking notes. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. But doubt still lingered. My brain kept repeating Randy's words. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was about to make the dumbest decision of my life. Then I remembered something my grandpa used to say when he let me taste the foam off a fresh batch. Beer is like life, kid. You screw up, you learn. You get better next time. But you gotta try first. And that was it. That was the moment I decided I was gonna do this. Even if I failed, at least it would be my failure. My risk, my shot at something bigger than just being the guy who won the lottery. I picked up the notebook, turned to the first recipe, and started making a plan. I found a listing late one night, scrolling through local property auctions while eating a cold turkey sandwich over sink. It was an old brewery, long abandoned, covered in rust and bad decisions. The photos weren't promising. Peeling paint, shattered windows, equipment that looked like it hadn't been used since the Reagan administration. And yet, something about it grabbed me. Maybe it was the exposed brick or the way the light hit the old copper brewing tanks. It wasn't just a building. It had character, history, maybe even a little soul left in it. So I placed a bid. Not a smart, calculated businessman bid, just a gut feeling. By morning, I was a proud owner of a rundown brewery that had probably seen more bar fights than successful batches of beer. Randy called the second he found out. You bought what? Are you out of your mind? It wasn't even a question. It was a full-blown accusation. I could hear the frustration in his voice, like I had just bet my life savings on a racehorse named Probably Gonna Lose. I let him rant, throwing in occasional and, yeah, sure, while I stared at the paperwork. He talked about real investments, financial advisors, and how I should think long-term. I tuned out somewhere between high-yield bonds and market trends. That night, still trying to convince myself I hadn't made the dumbest decision of my life, I stopped by my favorite dive bar for a drink. The kind of place with sticky floors, a jukebox that only half worked, and a bartender who had probably seen more confessions than a priest. That's when I saw her. Sarah. She was at the other end of the bar, nursing a beer and watching some baseball game she clearly didn't care about. I had noticed her before. She worked at the warehouse before I quit, always moving with this quiet confidence, like she was 10 steps ahead of everyone else. I had thought about talking to her a few times, but never did, mostly because I'm a genius when it comes to avoiding things I actually want. Tonight, though, she caught me looking. Mike, right? She said, raising an eyebrow. Lottery guy. Big spender. What brings you here? I chuckled, sliding onto the stool next to her, making questionable financial decisions. You? She smirked. Same, but mine only cost $6. One beer turned into 2, then 3, and before I knew it, we were deep in a conversation about brewing. I told her about my grandpa's old recipes, the brewery I just bought, the fact that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Instead of laughing at me, she actually seemed interested. My dad brewed, she said, tipping her bottle toward me. Taught me a thing or two. IPA is my thing, though. I blinked. You make your own beer? She shrugged. Yeah, got a batch in my fridge. You want to try it? I wasn't about to turn that down. We ended up outside, leaning against my truck, splitting a bottle of her homemade IPA. It was good, hoppy, citrusy, with just enough bite to make you sit up and pay attention. You're serious about this? She asked, looking at me over the rim of her bottle. I nodded. I think so. She studied me for a second, then smiled. I know you'll make it work. That was the moment I realized she wasn't like everyone else. She wasn't here to ask for anything. She wasn't laughing at me or talking down to me. She just believed in what I was doing. And for the first time since this crazy idea started, I actually believed it too. By the time I left, I wasn't just thinking about running a bar anymore. I was thinking about brewing my own beer. Not just serving other people's creations, but making something from scratch, something that actually meant something. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going to do it alone. The past couple months have been a blur of long days, late nights, and more paint fumes than I probably should have inhaled. Sarah and I had turned that rundown brewery into something that actually resembled a bar. The floors were finally clean, the taps were installed, and the walls weren't threatening to crumble. It wasn't just some dive anymore. It was my place. Our place. Sarah had been there through it all. She had a knack for knowing when I was about to lose my mind over a plumbing issue or when I needed to be reminded why I was doing this in the first place. She didn't just help. She made the whole thing feel possible. She had a way of calling me out on my self-doubt, usually with a well-timed eye roll and a sarcastic remark that somehow made me feel like less an idiot. Then my mom showed up. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was at the bar testing the tap system when I heard the front door creak open. I turned, expecting to see a delivery guy, but instead, there she was, standing in the doorway with a box in her hands. She wasn't smiling. That was the first sign something was coming. She set the box down on one of the tables, dust puffing up around it. "Thought you might want these," she said, lifting the lid. Inside were old family photos, some I hadn't seen in years. There was one of me and Randy, maybe 5 and 8 years old, hugging each other in front of a Christmas tree. Another of us playing in the backyard, covered in mud, laughing like we didn't have a care in the world. "Mom, what is this?" She sighed, pulling out one of the pictures and smoothing it over with her thumb like she was trying to erase time. "Your brother is struggling, Mike. He needs help." I felt my stomach tighten. "What kind of help?" She hesitated, which told me all I needed to know. Business hasn't been great. He made some bad investments. Things got away from him. I could already see where this was going. "And now," she continued, "he's in trouble." What kind of trouble? My voice was flatter than I intended. She wouldn't look at me. Debt trouble. The kind where he could lose everything. I exhaled through my nose, rubbing my jaw. I had expected this conversation for months now, but that didn't make it any easier to stomach. "Mom, I can't fix Randy's mistakes." "He's your brother," she said, her voice soft but heavy. "He always looked out for you. He always made sure you were okay. Don't you think you owe him that?" And there it was, the same old song, the same old guilt. Randy had always been the favorite, the responsible one, the one who did things right. And now, when he'd screwed up, I was supposed to step in and clean up the mess. I could feel the walls of my childhood closing in again, the expectations, the unspoken rules. But I wasn't that kid anymore. "Mom, I've worked my ass off of this place," I said, my voice steady. "This is the first thing in my life that's mine. I can't just throw it away because Randy made bad choices." Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't place. Maybe disappointment. Maybe realization. "You really won't help him?" "Not like this. Not by bailing him out." She nodded slowly, pressing her lips together like she was holding something back. Then, without another word, she closed the box of photos, picked it up, and walked out. I stood there for a long time after she left, staring at the empty doorway, feeling like I had just fought a battle I wasn't even sure I won. When Sarah walked in later that evening, she took one look at me and frowned. "You look like you need a drink." I let out a half-laugh, shaking my head. "You have no idea." She grabbed 2 glasses and poured, sliding one over to me. "To family drama?" she asked, raising hers. I clinked my glass against hers. "To finally doing things my way." She smirked, took a sip, and leaned back against the counter. "You know, you handled that better than I expected." I arched an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What were you expecting?" "I don't know. Maybe you caving under the guilt, calling Randy, handing over a fat check, then immediately regretting it." I snorted. "You have a lot of faith in me, huh?" She grinned. "More than you think." For the first time, I felt a little lighter. Maybe standing my ground didn't mean I was turning my back on family. Maybe it just meant I was finally standing up for myself. And for the first time, I actually meant it. The morning of the grand opening, I stood behind the bar, running a cloth over the polished wood for the 100th time. Turner's Tap, my place. The sign outside still smelled of fresh paint, and the scent of hops and wormwood filled the air. The tables, sturdy and worn just right, came from a local wood shop where an old craftsman still believed in making things by hand. Sarah had tracked him down at a flea market, sweet-talked him into the job over a couple of beers, and somehow got him to deliver them himself. They gave the place a warm, lived-in feel, like it had been there forever. This wasn't some corporate chain. It had heart. It had history. Sarah was already behind the counter, adjusting the taps, making sure everything was ready. She caught me watching and smirked. "You gonna stare at me all night or actually pour a drink?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "I was just making sure you weren't stealing my thunder." She rolled her eyes and grabbed a pint glass. "Well, boss, let's make it official." With a flick of her wrist, she pulled the first pour Turner's Ale, the first official beer from my own brewery. It flowed smooth, amber, and rich, with just the right amount of foam. She set it on the counter in front of me, raising an eyebrow. Moment of truth. I took a sip, and damn if it wasn't perfect. Then, before I could get sentimental about it, the door swung open. The first customer walked in, a local farmer named Hank, who had been skeptical when I told him I was opening a bar. "Didn't think you'd actually do it," he said, stomping off the mud from his boots as he approached the counter. I grinned. "Neither did I." Hank looked around, nodded in approval, then slid onto a stool. "Pour me whatever's best." Sarah didn't miss a beat, handing him a pint of Turner's Ale. He took a sip, smacked his lips, and gave a satisfied grunt. "Not bad, Turner. Not bad at all." And just like that, the place started filling up. Bikers rolled in, their leather jackets dusted from the road. The local electricians and warehouse guys took over a corner table. A group of teachers from a high school claimed a booth, already deep into a conversation about whose students were the biggest headaches. Even the mayor showed up, though mostly to shake hands and make sure people saw him supporting local business. But the best part? Not a single person was here because of the lottery. They weren't asking me for favors. They weren't expecting handouts. They just wanted a cold beer and a place that felt like home. I worked behind the bar, pouring drinks, cracking jokes, and watching something incredible happen. Turner's Tap wasn't just a bar. It was a gathering place, a part of the town. My little piece of something real. At some point, my mom showed up. She didn't say much, just sat at the far end of the bar, watching. I poured her a drink and slid it over. She took it, held it for a second, then finally met my eyes. And in that moment, I could tell she got it. She understood. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Sarah clinked her glass against mine. "You did it." I exhaled, shaking my head. We did it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval. I wasn't trying to measure up to anyone else's expectations. I had built something of my own, something that mattered. And man, did that beer taste better than anything I'd ever had before. As the night went on, the bar got louder, the laughter stronger. A guy at the pool table tried to hustle the wrong biker and ended up buying him a drink instead. A couple of old-timers swapped stories about the town back when things were simpler. A few new faces walked in, looked around, and decided to stay a while. Around midnight, Sarah leaned over and nudged me. "So, when are we brewing the next batch?" I smirked, already thinking about expanding. She shrugged. "You're a big deal now, Turner. You got to keep up." I laughed, shaking my head. But she wasn't wrong. This was just the beginning. The text message came in late, right as I was locking up the bar for the night. "Congrats, brother. When are we raising a glass?" "Randy." I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to reply. I could already hear his voice, dripping with that familiar mix of entitlement and condescension. If I answered, I'd be opening a door I had no interest in walking through. So I did the only thing that made sense. I locked my phone and slid it back into my pocket. Some doors are better left closed. I stepped outside, stretching my shoulders as the night air hit me. The sky was streaked with deep oranges and purples, the kind of sunset that made you stop for a second and just take it in. I grabbed a bottle of Turner's Ale, popped the cap, and settled onto one of the wooden chairs on the tap house's back patio. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. "Kate." I didn't pick up. I didn't even hesitate. Just let the call ring out until it stopped. I knew how that conversation would go. She'd start with small talk, maybe pretend to care about the bar, then slide into something about how people change and how maybe we should meet up just to catch up. But I wasn't that guy anymore, the one who sat around wondering why he was never enough. I took a long sip of my beer, let the crisp bitterness linger, and watched the last sliver of sun dip below the horizon. Winning the lottery hadn't changed me. Losing everything and building myself back up had. A year later, I stood on the porch of my new home, a small, quiet place near Lake Erie, the kind of house I never thought I'd have. Nothing flashy, just comfortable, a place I could breathe. Sarah was inside, probably on the phone with one of our distributors, making sure the latest shipment of Turner's ale made it to a couple of new bars in Pennsylvania. Expanding beyond the state had been her idea, and as usual, she had been right. She stepped outside just as I finished my coffee, tossing a set of keys in the air before catching them. The guy at the shop called. "Your truck's ready." I grinned. My old beater had finally given up, and instead of buying something absurdly flashy, I'd opted for another truck, just newer, less likely to break down in the middle of nowhere. She leaned against a railing next to me, the familiar scent of hops clinging to her hoodie. "You ever think about how weird this all is?" she asked. 2 years ago, you were stacking boxes in a warehouse, and now we're running a business. I smirked. "Yeah, and 2 years ago, you barely spoke to me." She laughed. "To be fair, you were kind of a mess." I faked a gasp. "Me? A mess? I was a beacon of stability." She rolled her eyes. "Uh-huh." I reached into my pocket, feeling the smooth velvet box I've been carrying around for a week. My fingers tightened around it as I exhaled. Speaking of stability, I said, stepping in front of her. Before she could respond, I dropped down on one knee and flipped open the box. Inside was a ring. Nothing too flashy, but elegant classic. Something I knew was perfect for her. Sarah's eyes widened, and for the first time since I met her, she was speechless. I grinned. "Took me long enough, huh?" She blinked, then let out a breathy laugh. "You really waited until now?" I shrugged. "Figured I had to make sure you weren't just in it for the beer." She smirked, shaking her head. "Mike, you idiot." Then she grabbed me by the collar and kissed me. When she pulled back, she glanced down at the ring, sliding it onto her finger with a smile. "Yeah, let's do this." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, then stood up and pulled her into a hug. Back in town, people didn't call me Randy's brother anymore. They didn't call me the guy who won the lottery. I was just Mike, the guy who owned Turner's Tap, the guy who built something real, the guy who finally figured out that happiness wasn't about proving something to anyone else. It was about making something for yourself. And man, that felt better than any jackpot ever could. As we sat on the porch, the sun setting over the lake, Sarah nudged me with her elbow. "So what's next?" I thought about it, let the idea settle. Maybe a second location. Maybe something bigger. She raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You just got used to sitting still." I smirked. "Yeah, well, turns out I like building things." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we watched the sky change colors, the lake calm and steady before us. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for the next big thing. I was already living it.